Her throat tightened so fast she thought she might choke. Amy was halfway through the second verse when it happened. One moment, the melody was flowing, rough around the edges, but hers, completely hers. And the next, the note hit a hidden edge inside her chest and snapped. Her voice cracked sharply, a jagged line through the warm, dim air of the club. The microphone caught it, magnified it, fed it back to her from the speakers as if the mistake had been underlined. The small room went very, very quiet. Amy's fingers kept moving on the guitar, almost on autopilot, but the chord she landed on didn't match the words she'd meant to sing. Her body flooded with a hot wave of panic that somehow still managed to feel cold at the same time. Don't freeze, keep going, keep going. But the more she tried to push through, the tighter everything became. Her throat, her chest, even her shoulders. It was like her own body was closing around the sound she was trying to let out. She caught sight of the front table, a couple looking up from their drinks now, blinking at her like they weren't sure if the mistake had really happened. A man at the bar shifted on his stool, pausing mid-sip. A group in the back stopped talking. The silence after that crack was worse than if they'd laughed. Amy swallowed. It didn't help. The microphone suddenly felt too close, the light too bright. Her heart pounded high in her ears, drowning out the soft hum of the amp behind her. She started, but the word tangled on the way out. Her hand slipped. The chord died completely. Someone coughed. A glass clinked. The bartender looked away, pretending not to notice. Amy forced a crooked half smile, the kind that might pass for self-deprecation on a good day, but tonight it just felt like surrender. "I'm sorry," she said quietly into the mic, and even that sounded wrong. She didn't wait for anyone to respond. She didn't want to see confusion or pity, or that polite, strained kind of encouragement that made everything worse. She stepped back from the stand, slid the guitar strap over her head, and walked off the stage as calmly as she could manage. Her legs didn't feel solid until she passed through the narrow doorway that led to the backstage corridor. The door clicked shut behind her, and the sounds of the club muffled immediately, like someone had dropped a blanket over the whole room. The corridor was barely a hallway, peeling cream-colored paint, a scuffed lino floor. A single buzzing fluorescent tube humming softly overhead. A stack of empty beer crates leaned against one wall. Amy leaned her guitar against the nearest crate and sank down beside it, back pressed to the cool plaster. As soon as she sat, her body remembered to shake. Her hands trembled in her lap, fingers twitching like they still wanted to play something right and couldn't. She stared at them, jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Perfect. Just perfect. She replayed the moment in her head. The build of the verse, the line she knew, the note she'd hit 100 times in her room. Then the snap, the tiny, brutal silence after. The way the room seemed to lean in. If I mess up again, they'll never take me seriously. It wasn't logical, she knew that somewhere, but the thought had already sunk its hooks in. She was young, unknown. A girl with a guitar, and a voice people told her was interesting when they meant they weren't sure yet. You don't get many chances when you're interesting. Her eyes burned. She pressed the heels of her hands against them until she saw brief sparks of color. She refused to cry. Not here, not now. Crying would make it real in a way it wasn't allowed to be. Maybe this is a sign, another thought whispered. Maybe you're not cut out for this. Maybe you're meant to write songs in quiet notebooks, not sing them where people can hear you break. She let her head tip back against the wall. The cold seeped into her scalp, grounding and uncomfortable at the same time. The murmur of voices seeped faintly through the door, the host saying something into the mic, probably patching over her abrupt exit. A burst of laugh tracks without context floated back. Someone started clapping, half-hearted and quickly dying. Her stomach twisted. She thought of her notebook back at the flat, pages filled with half-finished lines and scribbled chords. She pictured closing it for good. The idea hurt more than it should have. Amy rubbed her arms, trying to smooth down the goosebumps, but they stayed. She didn't hear the footsteps at first. The floor absorbed them, a soft shift of weight approaching from the far end of the corridor. "You all right there, love?" The voice was calm, low, with the faint grain of someone who'd spent a lot of years talking over music, smoke, and clinking glasses. Amy flinched like she'd been caught doing something wrong. She looked up. A woman stood a few feet away, leaning casually against the opposite wall. She was in her 40s maybe a bit older, with pale skin and dark hair pinned up in a way that seemed both careless and practiced. A touch of eyeliner had smudged slightly under one eye, not from tears, but from time. She wore a black blouse and jeans, nothing flashy, but there was something about the way she carried herself that said she knew exactly where she was allowed to stand in a room. Amy straightened a little. "Yeah, I'm fine." The woman's mouth quirked. That sounded about as convincing as that fluorescent light. She jerked her chin toward the tube overhead, which buzzed stubbornly. Despite herself, Amy huffed a short, humorless laugh. The woman pushed off the wall and patted over. Instead of towering over her, she slid down to sit beside Amy on the floor, back against the same peeling paint, knees drawn up loosely. They were shoulder to shoulder, but not touching. For a few seconds, she didn't say anything, just breathed. The quiet between them was different from the quiet in the club. This one didn't feel like judgment. It felt like space. Amy stared at the opposite wall. "I messed it up," she muttered. "Did you?" the woman asked mildly. "Sounded to me like your throat did something honest." Amy turned her head then, brow furrowing. "Honest? It broke," the woman said simply. "Because you care. That's all it is." Amy shook her head. "They were all looking at me." "Good." The woman smiled, not unkindly. "Means they were listening." Amy pulled her arms tighter around herself. "Not after that." The woman made a soft sound in her throat, somewhere between a hum and a snort. "You know what I remember about my first real gig?" she said. "Not the songs I nailed, not the ones they clapped for. I remember standing right where you are now, behind that same useless door, thinking I'd just ruined everything." Amy blinked. "You sing here?" "Used to," the woman answered. "Still do sometimes, when they remember I exist." There was no bitterness in it, just a clear-eyed acceptance. "I came in too early on a chorus," the woman continued. "Panicked, tried to fix it, made an even bigger mess. Whole room stared at me like I'd dropped my plate in the quiet part of a restaurant. I walked off stage, hid back here, promised myself I'd never do it again." "What changed?" Amy asked quietly. The woman tilted her head, considering. A girl poked her head round the door, couldn't have been more than 16. Shaky hands, borrowed dress. She was on after me. You could see the fear climbing her spine. Amy listened without moving. She said, "If you're still going back out there, maybe I can too," the woman said softly. And I realized something. They don't need us to be perfect. They just need us to be brave enough to stand there and be human in front of them. She turned her face fully toward Amy now. "Your voice didn't fail," she said. "Your courage just did something real." The words landed in Amy's chest like a hand placed gently over a bruise, not fixing it, but acknowledging it. She swallowed. It felt like failing. "Of course it did." The woman's tone was matter of fact. "Your standards are higher than your experience. That's normal. It hurts. It won't stop hurting entirely, but it stops being the only thing you feel." They sat in silence for a moment. The fluorescent light hummed. Somewhere out front, a fresh ripple of laughter rose as someone else took over to fill the gap. The woman reached for something beside her. Amy hadn't noticed the small tray on a crate, the cheap kettle plugged into a socket at ankle level, the stack of mismatched mugs. The woman poured from a thermos she must have brought in earlier, steam curling in the cold corridor air. "Here," she said, handing Amy a mug. Amy looked down, warm water with a slice of lemon floating near the rim. Not tea, just warmth. "It's all I've got," the woman said, "but it's decent for a throat that's decided to throw a tantrum." Amy wrapped both hands around the mug. The heat seeped slowly into her fingers. She hadn't realized how cold they were until they started to thaw. She lifted it, took a cautious sip. The warmth slid down, gentle, soothing a place the panic had burned raw. "I was supposed to show them I could do this," Amy murmured. "Instead, I showed them this." She flicked her eyes toward the closed door, meaning the crack, the silence, the walk-off. The woman considered her. "You showed them you're a person," she said, "with a body and nerves and a voice that sometimes tells the truth too loudly." Amy stared at her. "But what if they think I'm not good enough?" The woman shrugged a little. "Some of them will, some of them won't. Some of them are too busy thinking about their own lives to think anything at all. That's not the point." "Then what is?" The woman tapped the side of her mug with a fingernail, a tiny percussion. "The point is," she said slowly, You don't let one broken note write the whole song. Amy looked away, blinking hard. The woman leaned her head back against the wall and exhaled. Listen, she said, go back out there. Not to impress them, not to prove anything. Go back out because you walked onto that stage for a reason. Remind yourself what it was. Amy's heart thudded once, heavy. What if I break again? She whispered. Then you break again, the woman said simply. And you keep holding the guitar anyway. One day the breaking will just be part of how it all sounds. The thought scared Amy and soothed her at the same time. Through the door, the host's voice floated back, announcing a short break, inviting people to grab another drink. The night wasn't over yet. There was still space in it. Still time. The mug in her hands grew cooler. She realized she'd stopped shaking. Who are you? Amy asked. The woman smiled. Faint but genuine. Just someone who's had enough nights like this to know you'll regret quitting more than you'll ever regret cracking. She pushed herself to her feet and held out a hand. Amy stared at it. Her fingers flexed around the mug one last time, then she set it carefully on the crate and reached up. Their hands met. The grip was firm, anchoring. The woman pulled her gently up from the floor. Amy's legs felt steadier now. Her chest still carried a tightness, but it wasn't the suffocating kind. It was more like the tension of a held breath, right before a note. You don't have to sing the same song, the woman said. You don't have to say anything about what just happened. You just have to walk back out there and let them see you didn't disappear. Amy nodded slowly. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me, the woman replied. Just don't vanish. She squeezed Amy's shoulder once, then stepped aside, giving her a clear path to the door. Amy stood there for a second, facing the dull metal, hand hovering over the handle. Her reflection in the narrow wired glass panel looked smaller than she felt. She took a breath in, held it, let it out. Then she opened the door. The club didn't erupt in applause when she reappeared. No one stood on chairs. But a few people looked up. The bartender lifted his chin in acknowledgement. The host moved aside with a quick, grateful smile. Amy walked back to the microphone, adjusting it a little lower this time. Her guitar felt heavy but right against her body as she slipped the strap over her shoulder. I'd like to try that again, she said into the mic, voice steady, if not entirely sure. From the top, someone at the front table clapped once, decisively. A few others followed. It wasn't loud, but it was enough. She began again. The first chord rang truer this time. Not perfect. Her voice still carried a hint of the earlier shake, but there was something else inside it now, too. A core of decision. She sang the whole song. Every line. When she approached the note that had broken her before, her heart pounded, but she didn't pull back. She let it come. The note wavered, but it held. Not flawless, real. When she finished, there was a pause that felt different from the earlier one, weighted with attention rather than shock. Then the room clapped, softly, modestly, but with a kind of respect she could feel rather than analyze. She glanced toward the side of the room. In the shadows near the corridor door, she saw the woman watching, arms loosely folded, a small approving smile on her face. Amy exhaled. She didn't know it yet, but this night would echo for years. Years later, the club looked both exactly the same and completely different. The cramped stage was a little less cramped now, extended by a couple of feet. The old speakers had been replaced by newer ones that didn't buzz when someone hit a low note. The walls had been repainted a warm, deep color, and a string of soft lights traced the ceiling, giving the room a glow that felt intentional instead of accidental. Above the bar hung a modest framed sign. Open Voices Night, hosted by Amy. Amy stood near the back, watching the newest singer finish her song. The girl was maybe 19, maybe 20, voice delicate but determined. She held the mic with both hands like it might otherwise float away. Her last note trembled, but didn't break. The room applauded. The girl's eyes shone. Amy clapped along, something in her chest tightening with recognition. Every performer tonight carried the same mixture of terror and hope she remembered so clearly. When she first floated her idea to the club owner, an ongoing night specifically for young women and non-binary singers to play short sets without having to fight for space on mixed bills, he'd raised an eyebrow. Sounds noble, he'd said, but who's paying for extra sound checks, extra rehearsal time? "I am," she'd said without flinching. She'd meant it. She'd invested quietly, paying for a decent sound engineer twice a month, donating a new mic, buying a small upright piano that now sat squeezed against the side wall. She'd reached out to a few friends to offer low-cost vocal coaching before each night. No big press release, no charity headlines, just scaffolding, invisible unless you needed it. The girl on stage finished and hurried off, breathless, a wide smile cracking through her nerves. Amy met her at the side steps and squeezed her hand. "You stayed with it," Amy told her. "That's what matters." The girl laughed, still catching her breath. "My voice almost went in the second verse." "And?" Amy shrugged lightly. "You stayed. That's the part they'll remember." The girl nodded, eyes bright. "Thank you for doing this night." Amy smiled. "Thank you for filling it." The host stepped up to the mic to announce a short break before the final set. Amy's heart rate ticked up a fraction, because the final set wasn't just anyone. She crossed the room, weaving between small round tables until she reached a spot she'd reserved near the front. A single chair, slightly apart, sat waiting. The woman in it looked around the room with open curiosity, as though measuring the subtle differences time had created. Her hair was streaked with more silver now, but the way she held herself hadn't changed. Still grounded, still aware, still very much there. "You weren't joking," she said as Amy approached. "You really did bring this place back to life." Amy laughed softly. "It always had a heartbeat," she said. "I just turned up the volume." The woman smiled, eyes creasing at the corners. "You always did have a line in you." Amy sat on the edge of the table beside her, facing the small stage. "Do you remember that night?" she asked. The woman's expression sobered, softened. "I remember you sitting on that awful floor," she said, "and that light making you look green." Amy exhaled through her nose. "That light's gone now," she nodded toward the back. "Replaced it as soon as I could afford it." The woman chuckled. An excellent use of success. For a moment they were quiet, watching the staff reset glasses, adjusting mic stands, preparing for the next person to step into the spotlight. "I never told you," Amy said, voice low, "but I almost quit that night." "I figured," the woman replied gently. "You had that look." Amy turned to her. "You could have just walked past me," she said. "You had your own set to think about, your own life." The woman shrugged one shoulder. "Could have," she agreed. "But then I'd have missed this." She gestured to the room. Tables filled with young artists, scribbling lyrics on napkins, tuning guitars, checking set lists on their phones. Friends leaning in close, whispering encouragement. A few older faces too, watching with the kind of quiet pride that comes from having been through it and survived. Amy felt her chest tighten again, but this time it was gratitude, not panic. "Tonight," she said, standing up, "belongs to you as much as it does to them." The woman raised an eyebrow. "Oh? You'll see." Amy stepped back toward the stage. She climbed the couple of steps, new wood, still holding the faint smell of varnish, and took the mic. The room quieted gradually, conversations dimming, attention tilting in her direction. She'd grown used to that weight over the years. It didn't scare her anymore. It felt like a trust she'd agreed to carry. "Thank you all for being here," she said, "for singing, for listening, for letting this little room hold your firsts, your almosts, and your not quite sures." A soft murmur of amusement rippled through the crowd. "This place gave me one of my worst nights," she continued, "and one of my most important ones." She glanced toward the front row. The woman sat very still, eyes on her. "Years ago," Amy said, "I walked off this stage because my voice broke in the middle of a song. I thought I'd ruined everything. I hid back there." She pointed toward the corridor door, now painted the same warm color as the walls, "and decided maybe I shouldn't be doing this at all." A few heads turned to look at the door. "But someone came and sat on that disgusting floor next to me," Amy went on, smiling faintly. "She didn't give me a speech. She didn't tell me I was amazing. She just told me that what I was feeling was real, and that it didn't have to be the end of the story." She took a breath. "She handed me a mug of warm water," Amy said. "Told me to go back out, not to impress anyone, but to remind myself why I started." She paused, letting the memory fully pass through her again. "I did," she said simply, and in a very, very quiet way. It changed everything. The room was completely silent now. Amy's gaze found the woman's. They held it. "I want to introduce you," Amy said, "because this night, this room, and a lot of what I've built since, wouldn't exist without her decision to stay with me when my voice broke." She held out her hand toward the front. "Please help me thank her," Amy said, "for staying." The woman looked briefly like she might protest, but the wave of applause started before she could. It wasn't explosive. It didn't need to be. It was warm, sustained, honest. Reluctantly, almost shyly, the woman stood. She dipped her head once in acknowledgement, eyes glistening in a way she didn't bother to hide. Amy stepped down, meeting her halfway. Up close, she could see the years etched slightly deeper into the woman's face and the strength that sat easily in her gaze. "You didn't have to do this," the woman murmured, leaning in. "Yes," Amy said quietly, "I did." From a small case near the monitors, Amy lifted a simple plaque, nothing ornate, just a carefully engraved piece of metal on wood. She handed it to the woman. On it were the words, "For the one who stayed backstage. Your kindness keeps echoing." The woman read it, lips pressing together. "Oh, love," she whispered. "You didn't need to." "This isn't just a moment," Amy said, her voice steady. "I've set up something under your name, a small fund. Every year, we'll choose a new young singer from these nights, someone whose voice shook but didn't run. They'll get studio time, a mentor, and a little extra money to help them keep going when everything in them says to stop." The woman stared at her. "You're serious?" "Very," Amy said. The applause rose again, catching them both in its gentle roar. The woman's eyes filled. She blinked once, twice, letting the tears gather without falling. "You know," she said softly, a half laugh in her voice, "I barely remember what I played that night." "I remember what you said," Amy replied. The woman shook her head lightly, smiling despite herself. "All I did was tell the truth," she said. "That was all I needed," Amy answered. She turned back to the mic for the last time that evening. "One more thing," she said to the room. "If your voice breaks, on this stage or any other, don't disappear. Stay. Pick up where you left off. Someone out there needs to see that realness more than they need to hear perfection." She glanced at the woman, then at the rows of faces in front of her. "Realness," Amy said, letting the word settle, "touches people deeper than perfection ever could.